This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. We are coming up on the one-year anniversary of Donald Trump's inauguration. A new CNN poll shows 58% of Americans describe his first year back in office as a failure. A year ago today, 56% of Americans told CNN they expected the American economy to be better in the next 12 months. Now, after 1 year of Donald Trump back in office, only 40% of Americans are optimistic about 2026 in terms of the economy. What are most Americans concerned about? By a margin of 2-1 over every other issue, it is the economy. Inflation. Americans don't approve of ICE. They don't want to invade Greenland because Donald Trump is turning America into Iceland. We don't want to invade Iran or Venezuela. The only thing Americans really care about? Inflation, their job, rent, food, and health care. Donald Trump is failing on all counts, which means the only way he can salvage the 2026 midterms is by creating so much confusion and chaos on the streets that he can finally invoke the Insurrection Act and either, yes, postpone the midterms, or short of that, convince enough voters the man who created all this chaos is the only person who can restore order, so you better vote for Republicans. As Yale professor Timothy Snyder, one of the world's leading experts on fascism, as he is now warning, all it will take is one big event, something unmentionable to scare Americans, just enough so they rally around a strong man. All it takes is something so catastrophic it would be considered unpatriotic, indeed seditious, to criticize Donald Trump. Never forget the American voter and the American voter's childish response right after 9/11. We were desperately in need of a father figure, and George W. Bush, within weeks after 9/11, became the most popular president in American history. Most Americans believed the president who ignored intelligence reports warning him that Osama bin Laden is planning to fly commercial airlines into the World Trade Center. He ignored those intelligence reports and instead played golf. After 9/11, most Americans thought this guy was going to keep us safe. The man who sat for 7 minutes after being told America was under attack. He continued to read My Pet Goat to school children for 7 minutes because he didn't want to scare anyone. And then he proceeded to spend all of 9/11 flying around America in Air Force One to chicken shit to land in Washington, D.C. and make his way to the Situation Room where Dick Cheney was giving out all the orders. It didn't matter the nation had been attacked. It didn't matter that it was he who let our guard down. And we were told to watch what we say about Bush. We were told, offer up blind obedience, never question his motives. And he took this newfound popularity. He had like a 90% approval rating, and he took it and he decided he was going to avenge 9/11 by attacking Iraq and Afghanistan, two nations that had zero to do with 9/11. But to question that, to say, wait a second, Al-Qaeda is hanging out in the hill country of Afghanistan. We should be attacking Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. To question the attacks on Iraq, the invasion of Afghanistan, that was considered seditious, hateful towards our troops, our president, and of course, America. Well, we're only a little more than 2 weeks into 2026. Venezuela, Greenland, ICE turning into Trump's private police, Trump now telling soldiers to be prepared for the Insurrection Act. We have an economy teetering. And in 12 days, another government shutdown. The news cycles this year will grow faster and faster. We'll go from 3 big stories a day to 5 big stories a day because Donald Trump wants to flood the zone with so much garbage, the American people won't be able to discern what's nonsense and what is an actual seizure of our nation's levers of power. Don't pay attention to what Trump says. Pay attention to what he does. Trump said, I'm not attacking Venezuela. He kept saying that right up until he attacked Venezuela. He said, I'm not going to invoke the Insurrection Act while he's telling his Pentagon, prepare to send troops into Minnesota. He likes the element of surprise. So his element of surprise is get us to believe his lies. So don't pay attention to what he says. Pay attention to what the people around him are doing, not what they or Trump are saying. And it's not just Trump, it's the people around him. Hegseth, Rubio, Stephen Miller, Pam Bondi, Kristi Noem, Kash Patel, J.D. Vance. These are the worst people in our country, and they're now running things. They don't care. They are demented. They are demented, and they're mental defectives. And they're not caring. Their rage and contempt flows all the way down, empowering every lowlife with a badge and a gun, like that ICE agent who killed Renee Good. The Los Angeles Times reporting that an ICE agent accused of shooting to death 43-year-old Chris Porter, a black father of 2 on New Year's Eve, has been accused in recent court filings of whipping his own sons with a belt, as well as constantly making homophobic and racist comments. Did I mention he's an ICE agent? Still on duty. This agent reportedly shot to death his black neighbor, Chris Porter, on New Year's Eve. The ICE agent claimed Porter was threatening him with a gun, but witnesses and a lawyer for Porter's family say Porter was firing his weapon into the air to celebrate the new year. Probably shouldn't have been doing that, but the incident took place in an apartment complex in Northridge, which is part of Los Angeles County. Los Angeles police are investigating, while Homeland Security defends the ICE agent, saying he was responding to an active shooter. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland on Sunday called for the defunding of ICE. Van Hollen said protesters in Minnesota are not breaking the law. ICE agents are, calling ICE a lawless agency in need of dramatic reform. Van Hollen accused Trump of lying when he claims ICE is rounding up, quote, the worst of the worst. Senator Van Hollen said after the Department of Homeland Security posted data showing 80% of the people apprehended by ICE have 0 criminal records, the department immediately removed that database from the internet. The Cato Institute, a right-wing libertarian think tank, reports that of the nearly 3,000 people ICE arrested since it began operations in Minnesota, only 5% had any record of violent crime. Now, ICE is forbidden from kicking open anyone's door without a judicial warrant. Judicial warrants are very difficult to get. So they're not allowed to come into your home or your place of work without a judicial warrant. But that's not stopping them for doing just that. They often present what are called administrative warrants. Those are warrants signed by some Department of Homeland Security flunky. It can't be used to enter a person's home, no matter how authoritative they make it look. But ICE agents right now are presenting these administrative warrants as proof they are authorized to kick open doors. You need a judicial warrant. They need a judge to sign off on it. This means ICE cannot enter your home, your work, your restaurant, your place of worship without a judicial warrant, which they must present and most likely don't possess. 38-year-old Garrison Gibson, an immigrant from Liberia, says at the beginning of this year, ICE agents in Minnesota broke down his door, flashed no warrant, while pointing guns at him and his family, including his 10-year-old daughter, before taking him into custody. On the way to the detention facility, he asked to see a judicial warrant, but ICE only had an administrative warrant, meaning they were not allowed to kick down his door, which ended up costing $700 to replace. Gibson wasn't breaking any laws and, in fact, had done his last immigration check-in 2 weeks before getting arrested, during which he said agents began taking trophy pictures of him because of his size. Gibson was shipped off to an ICE detention center in Texas, but then, thanks to a court order, was sent back to Minneapolis and reunited with his family. Gibson said when he was arrested, it was below freezing. Agents wouldn't allow him to even get his coat. And when he arrived at the ICE detention facility in Minneapolis, he was shackled in a room alongside 40 other inmates with one open-air toilet. Democrat Robin Kelly, an Illinois congresswoman, filed articles of impeachment against Kristi Noem, Donald Trump's Homeland Security chief. 50 House Democrats signed on in support of her impeachment resolution. The impeachment articles accuse Kristi Noem of obstruction of Congress by not allowing House members to conduct on-site inspections of ICE facilities, despite a recent court order demanding she allow members of Congress to perform surprise visits without having to wait a week before being allowed in. Her policy is you have to give us 7 days notice so we can clean the place up. Noem said she is not obeying the judge's order, but she says she's not violating the judge's order because, in her twisted mind, the judge ordered ICE to use funds allocated in the 2026 budget to open the facilities to members of Congress. Noem said ICE is now using funds allocated in one big, beautiful bill, not from the 2026 budget, so that nullifies the judge's order for her to allow same-day visits by members of Congress. Makes no sense, right? It's not supposed to. In the second article of impeachment, Noem is accused of violating the public trust by creating what Congresswoman Kelly calls a reign of terror in cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, Charlotte, and Minneapolis, which are all being targeted right now by ICE under the leadership of Greg Bovino, whose father killed a young woman after he got into his car drunk and crashed into her. Greg Bovino's father only served 1 year in jail for killing a young girl because he's white. That would be Border Commander Greg Bovino, who was accused by a federal judge last year of lying under oath while testifying on the use of force in Chicago. I actually owe Border Commander Greg Bovino an apology. As you can see from this picture, he's actually a lot taller than I thought. So, look, that's Greg Bovino, Border Commander, and he can't change the fact that he's short. But what he can do is change how he deals with being a small man. Now, if you watch these ICE videos, there's a lot of body dysmorphia going on with Bovino and the men around him. A lot of these ICE agents are either morbidly obese or lacking in the height department. So these are incels, violent men who are involuntarily celibate, and that's why they can't wait to drag women out of their cars and pin them to the ground, because it's the only way they get to touch one. Look, I'm not thrilled with my body. I'm not good looking. So I learned to be a nice person. Turns out just being nice, being generous with your heart, maybe taking a shower occasionally, brushing my teeth, something America's ICE agents seem to have never learned. You know, all of that sometimes might get you laid. But if you're like Greg Bovino and these ICE agents and your penis doesn't work, it's not about getting laid. It isn't about getting laid because it doesn't work. I look at Greg Bovino and I know what makes him angry. He's not angry that women see him as half a man. What makes Greg Bovino furious is that if a woman did say yes to him, he couldn't perform. He exudes impotence. Again, it's no crime to be a wee bit of a man baby like Greg Bovino. There isn't a man in America who likes the way he looks. But it's how people respond to the cards they're dealt. It's how people like Greg Bovino, a wee bit of a man, responds to being a baby, little man baby. I've watched the videos of the protesters in Minneapolis calling him short. He doesn't like it. He does not like being called short. So if you're a protester and you see Greg Bovino, please do not call him short. I've watched these Minnesota protesters, especially the women, calling the ICE agents short. Don't do that. It hurts their feelings. That's why they're ICE agents. Body dysmorphia. They don't like the way they look. You don't want to hurt an ICE agent's feelings. Look at this POS, Greg Bovino. Let's get another picture of him. Look at him. He's about 4'6" in heels. He spikes his hair. Look at that. Because he foolishly thinks spiking his hair with gel adds a few inches. Bovino's so stupid he probably thinks he can add a few inches down below by spiking his pubic hair too. That's not the way it works, Greg Bovino. I am not making this up about Greg Bovino. This is the truth. I tell you the truth here, okay? Greg Bovino's father, you can Google this. Greg Bovino's father got behind the wheel of a car drunk and killed a young girl, but he only did 1 year in prison for manslaughter because he's white. This is true. Google it. Greg Bovino's father is a murderer, and this is also true. I don't make stuff up. Google this. This is also true. Greg Bovino only joined Border Patrol because he didn't meet the height requirement for the Lollipop Guild. Okay? I don't make stuff up on this show. Here's another true fact. If you own a slaughterhouse in, say, Chicago or Minnesota, border czar Tom Homan will call off an ICE raid if you let him spend 20 minutes alone with your prettiest pig because he misses his wife and daughter. Wait, I'm not done. On Friday, Homeland Security Chief Kristi Noem designated her dermatologist, Dr. Maurice Bemelman, a domestic terrorist. Some things I do for myself. Remember people who used to draw mustaches when we were really young? We would draw mustaches on Raquel Welch. Well, I've gotten better at it. That's not AI, that's Photoshop, by the way. And I spent hours prepping each boil on Kristi Noem's face, adding each hair meticulously. That's what Kristi Noem looks like without 6 hours of hair and makeup each morning. Well, anyway, the third article of impeachment accuses Noem of self-dealing using Department of Homeland Security funds to award contracts to her friends. On November 14th of last year, Justin Elliott, Joshua Kaplan, and Alex Majeski reported in ProPublica that the Department of Homeland Security has spent close to $220 million producing commercials of Kristi Noem in front of Mount Rushmore, dressed in a cowboy hat and wearing cowboy chaps, warning immigrants to self-deport. $220 million of your dollars on this advertising campaign. Have you seen any of them? I watched 3 seconds and I wanted to self-deport. Those commercials, according to ProPublica, were produced by outside contractors, including one owned by Ben Yoho, the husband of Tricia McLaughlin, the official spokesperson for Homeland Security. Tricia McLaughlin, the official spokesperson for Homeland Security, her married name is Yoho, which works out perfect because that's how Donald Trump greets Tricia McLaughlin whenever he sees her. Yo-ho. Anyway, bidding for government contracts by law must be competitive. But Kristi Noem, according to ProPublica, waived that law by citing a national emergency so she could give Ben Yoho a piece of the $220 million Department of Homeland Security advertising pie without having to bid on the project. So what is that national emergency justifying Kristi Noem suspending competitive bids for a DHS advertising contract? Yoho wants his money, bitch. He wants his money. That would be Ben Yoho, husband of Tricia. The ICE agent had no choice but to discharge his weapon once the suspect weaponized their vehicle. McLaughlin, that's her full name. Tricia, the ICE agent, had no choice but to discharge his weapon once the suspect weaponized their vehicle. McLaughlin. She is the official spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security, and she is a liar. Whenever an ICE agent discharges their weapon, she automatically says it was in self-defense after the suspect's vehicle had been weaponized, even if the suspect wasn't near a car. Appearing on television last week, McLaughlin, or Ms. Yoho, said last week that thanks to one big beautiful bill, Homeland Security will now require all ICE officers to wear body cams. Kristi Noem and I were having a drink last night. This is a picture. I took this photograph of Kristi Noem. We had a drink. She's dating Corey Lewandowski, who's he's not handsy. He's kind of fisty. You know about Corey Lewandowski. That's her boyfriend, and he has a history of violence with women. And trying to get Kristi to break up with Corey Lewandowski. You're married. You're a good Christian woman. Anyway, so thanks to one big beautiful bill, they can now afford to give body cams to all the ICE agents. Well, Kristi Noem said the money was already there, but one big beautiful bill allocated several $billions for hair and makeup. You don't want ICE agents with body cams if you can't have hair and makeup standing by for them, because occasionally, the body cam is on and they shoot each other with their body cams. They shoot each other with their body cams. They shoot us with their guns, but each other with the body cam. Remember Jonathan Ross? He is the ICE agent who reportedly killed Renee Good. Well, he was not wearing a body cam at the time of the murder, but he was recording the event with his cell phone, where he captured someone, presumably himself, muttering "effing bitch" after he put 4 holes into her. He's just an ICE agent performing his job. That's the job of an ICE agent, to put 4 holes in a woman and allegedly, as she lay dying, say "effing bitch." That's the job of an ICE agent. Now, here's what I don't understand about this Jonathan Ross, if he is, in fact, the shooter. So from what I'm reading, he's this ICE agent. He was able to do this. He held a cell phone in one hand, a gun in the other. He fired his gun 4 times, killing an innocent woman, while at the same time with his other hand filming it with his cell phone, He's back on the job, no fine, no investigation. One hand is a cell phone, another hand a gun. But if I'm sitting at a red light checking email on my iPhone, $300 fine. ICE agents in Minnesota, this is a sweet story. This is sweet. People are beating up on ICE agents right now. But this is sweet. ICE agents in Minnesota arrested 3 people working in a Mexican restaurant where the ICE agents had just eaten lunch. So they had lunch at this Mexican restaurant, and then they arrested the staff. Whatever happened to not tipping if you don't like the service? It's horrible. It's like a scene out of a horror movie. The level of sadism. They walk into a Mexican restaurant, they eat their meal, and then arrest the people serving them, knowing, like they're wolfing down this meal, knowing they're about to destroy the lives of, I think, 3 people. And they can eat. They don't have an upset stomach. I would call that a monster. I would call that a subhuman who could do that. 4 ICE agents, think about this. They had lunch inside El Tapatio, family-owned restaurant in Wilmar, Minnesota, about 75 miles from Minneapolis. Witnesses, this is an actual photo, were able to capture the ICE agents being served their meals by frightened wait staff, according to bystander videos. After the restaurant closed, the ICE agents then began following 3 workers as these workers made their way home to pick up their family, to see friends. They arrested one outside a church, the other outside a middle school. This is evil. It's a definition of evil. The day after, more than 50 Democrats said they supported articles of impeachment for Kristi Noem. These were the articles of impeachment filed by Congresswoman Robin Kelly. 14 Democratic members of Congress sent a letter to Donald Trump calling on him to fire Noem due to her mismanagement of FEMA. The Democrats accused Noem of endangering the lives of Americans by making drastic cuts to the FEMA workforce, leaving FEMA ill-equipped to deal with the next natural disaster. The Democrats also said Noem is slow-walking FEMA's response to hurricanes, tornadoes, and flash floods by insisting that she sign off on any expenditure that exceeds $100,000. When flash floods hit central Texas last July 4th, it took 3 days before Kristi Noem signed off on FEMA deploying search and rescue helicopters because the price tag exceeded $100,000. She waited 3 days before approving search and rescue helicopters. Nearly 140 people died, 1/3 of whom were children. How many would still be alive had those search and rescue copters been dispatched immediately instead of 3 days later? Meanwhile, back in October, Kristi Noem greenlit $200 million to be spent on the purchase of 2 Gulfstream jets for her own personal use. Homeland Security Chief Kristi Noem appeared on CBS News Sunday morning and denied that ICE agents were using pepper spray and or chemical irritants on protesters. Now, she just lies. I mean, that's just a lie. She's asking us not to believe the thousands of videos we've all seen, videos of ICE agents randomly spraying protesters or just innocent bystanders. She just asks that we take her word for it, that it's not happening. So this is a screen capture. You cannot work now for the Department of Homeland Security unless you're an inveterate liar. Kristi Noem is a liar. Tricia Yoho or McLaughlin is a liar. And this is a screen capture of Border Commander Greg Bovino tossing 2 canisters of tear gas at peaceful protesters in Chicago's Little Village. This happened last October. Now, this was in direct defiance of a court order forbidding ICE from tossing tear gas unless the ICE agent feared for their life. Greg Bovino was called before the Illinois judge who issued this injunction forbidding the use of tear gas, and Bovino testified under oath that the mob had grown violent, that he had gotten hit in the head by a rock. But when video of the incident was played in the courtroom, Bovino, under oath, told the judge, well, maybe I haven't been forthcoming about the actual events. And the judge said, you mean you lied under oath? The judge, Judge Ellis, later said she was considering a criminal referral, making a criminal referral to the Justice Department, accusing Greg Bovino of perjuring himself. Of course, the problem with a criminal referral of perjury for Greg Bovino is it would be, you have to make the referral to Donald Trump's Justice Department, which views allegations of perjury as a badge of honor. They lie. They just lie. On Sunday, as I just said, Kristi Noem told CBS News, my ICE agents don't use tear gas. Then, when CBS News presented Kristi Noem with a video montage of her ICE agents spraying innocent protesters randomly, Noem did a complete 180, insisting the ICE agents don't spray pepper spray, but they have to because the protesters are threatening their lives. Well, we know that's another lie. Peaceful protesters are not threatening the lives of these ICE agents. They might be threatening the livelihoods of these ICE agents, but not their lives. On the last show, I talked about the Illinois judge, this would be Judge Ellis, who last autumn began monitoring the Operation Midway Blitz in Chicago. She called Greg Bovino in to testify after he and his agents in Chicago began violating her injunction banning the use of tear gas on peaceful protesters. So she wrote in a follow-up ruling that Greg Bovino had perjured himself and that she was considering a criminal referral. Judge Ellis also ordered all ICE agents to wear their badge numbers so they could be seen, and she also ordered Greg Bovino to wear a body cam at all times. This was a monumental injunction that temporarily slowed down Operation Midway Blitz in Chicago. It was in response to a lawsuit filed by civil rights activists in Chicago. So after Judge Ellis's ruling, the government, that would be the Department of Homeland Security, appealed her ruling, and the Judge Ellis's ruling got overturned, meaning ICE can pretty much operate with impunity in Chicago, especially since the plaintiffs in this case decided to drop it. They decided not to appeal the appellate court's ruling. They feared the Seventh Circuit Court would rule in favor of ICE, thereby making it that much harder to sue ICE again. Now, the appellate court ruled that Judge Ellis, she was the judge monitoring ICE in Chicago. They said that she issued the injunction banning the use of tear gas. The appellate court ruled that her orders were way too broad. So maybe the plaintiffs will file a new lawsuit and try this again. I know this is complicated because you'll hear in the news, a judge today banned the use of tear gas, and you think, oh, problem solved. Well, no, the government takes it to a higher court, and none of this gets solved until it goes before the Supreme Court if they take it. Now, there was an interesting development in Minnesota on Friday. It may be good news. We had an interesting in Minnesota. The lawsuit is Tincher versus Nome. This is a lawsuit filed by the ACLU and other civil rights organizations on behalf of 5 Minnesota protesters who were savagely beaten and arrested by ICE agents in Minneapolis back in December when Operation Metro Surge began. On Friday, a federal judge, Kate Menendez, she's a Biden appointee, she issued a preliminary injunction blocking ICE agents from using pepper spray on peaceful protesters. The injunction also bans them from arresting protesters and retaliating against them. This preliminary injunction was ordered after Judge Catherine Menendez, Biden appointee, ruled in Tincher v. Nome there was overwhelming evidence ICE agents have acted improperly, violating the First and Fourth Amendment rights of protesters. She said they've been doing this ever since ICE launched Operation Metro Surge in Minneapolis, St. Paul, to target the Somali community. In her ruling, Judge Menendez wrote, quote, "Constitutional rights are not diminished during periods of chaotic unrest." Well, that's what Trump is banking on if he does, in fact, invoke the Insurrection Act. And the government is going to appeal Judge Menendez's ruling. They're accusing Judge Menendez of micromanaging the Department of Homeland Security and ICE. What, forcing ICE agents to obey the Constitution is micromanaging? In her ruling, Menendez wrote that since ICE launched Operation Metro Surge in December of last year, that would be in Minneapolis, St. Paul, 3,000 federal agents have engaged in what she described as an unprecedented immigration enforcement operation. We've never seen this before. One witness told her that Trump has turned Minneapolis into a war zone. Another described it as an occupation. The fear among ordinary people in Minneapolis and St. Paul, the fear, they say, is palpable. This is all in her ruling. So she issued a preliminary injunction. So what is a preliminary injunction? It is an order given by a judge before something goes to trial, and the preliminary injunction is based on the evidence presented and the likelihood of who would ultimately win at trial. Preliminary injunction is the judge saying, I'm weighing all the evidence. There hasn't been a trial yet, but it looks like, in this case, the ACLU is going to win. So I'm going to issue a preliminary injunction forbidding ICE from throwing tear gas and arresting innocent protesters until this trial is resolved. And enough evidence was presented by the plaintiffs to convince this judge they would most likely prevail. So she ordered ICE not to retaliate against peaceful protesters, not to use crowd dispersal weapons like tear gas or pepper balls on peaceful protesters. And ICE agents, and this is really important because Renee Good was killed over this. ICE agents cannot stop or arrest drivers who are following them. It is not against the law to follow law enforcement. The defendants in the lawsuit are the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, and Kristi Noem. Lawyers for the government told the judge ICE agents had no choice but to make these arrests, to fire pepper spray at protesters, to arrest them for following them because these were angry mobs of people. But the judge wrote, American citizens monitoring the actions of law enforcement are not an angry mob. She accused the government of only giving her hearsay evidence that ICE agents were ever in any danger, but no actual proof. The judge wrote that there is a qualitative imbalance between the evidence offered by the plaintiffs and the evidence offered by the government. Because the government, being Kristi Noem, they lie. They're liars. The judge said ICE was unable to provide a single video or any witnesses to prove that the ICE agents were ever confronted by an angry mob endangering their lives. Judge Menendez wrote that while the plaintiffs presented several videos and 34 sworn affidavits signed under the penalty of perjury, the defense, the government, provided one declaration from a witness who refused to sign it for fear of being charged with perjury. See, they are liars. They are all liars. Kristi Noem, Tricia Yoho McLaughlin, Donald Trump. The judge said all the evidence provided by the government was hearsay, without one single witness offering firsthand knowledge of the events. The judge ruled protesters are not just allowed to record the activities of ICE agents, they are also permitted to follow in their own cars ICE agents, so long as it doesn't endanger civilians. ICE officers can't endanger an ICE officer or impede the ability of an ICE agent to perform their job. Again, the judge ruled it is not a crime to follow a police officer so long as you do it at a safe distance. She said ICE agents, police officers, cannot claim to have reasonable suspicion to make an arrest merely because the suspect is following the police officers. She wrote, "It is unconstitutional, a violation of a citizen's First Amendment rights. It is a violation of a citizen's First and Fourth Amendment rights to arrest someone because they're monitoring law enforcement," which is what Renee Good was doing. The judge said there was substantial evidence ICE agents pepper sprayed nonviolent students at Roosevelt High School. The judge wrote that innocent, peaceful observers were pepper sprayed by roving bands of ICE agents in cars with out-of-state license plates. One of those pepper sprayed was Minnesota State Representative Aisha Gomez, whose only crime that day was standing peacefully next to a crew from CBS News. The judge wrote ICE agents threw a grandmother face first to the ground, arresting her merely for asking, "Are you with ICE?" They don't wear badges, so she asked, "Who are you? Are you with ICE?" One officer was heard on tape yelling in her face as she went down, "This is what you get for interfering." She wasn't interfering. Multiple witnesses and video clearly show the grandmother was merely asking a question. Are you with ICE? Reasonable question. Reasonable question. Masked men with guns and no ID? Who are you? Are you with ICE? The grandmother, named Susan Tincher, was shackled for 5 hours while being held at the Bishop Henry Whipple Federal Building in downtown Minneapolis. Here she is, being thrown face first into the ground. It's a grandmother, a woman, as ICE agents arrest her. On the way to the jail, she said ICE agents threatened her with more pepper spray and then used cutters to remove her wedding ring. You're not allowed to wear a wedding ring when you're being detained. The judge ruled that ICE could not corroborate their claims that the grandmother was resisting arrest, ignoring verbal commands, or assaulting an ICE agent. We had to throw her to the ground because grandma was assaulting an ICE agent. The judge seemed especially appalled by the arrest of Abikdar Noor, a Somali immigrant who has been an American citizen for 20 years. His arrest took place on December 15th in Minneapolis. Noor can be seen on video telling protesters not to throw things at ICE agents and telling them to keep it peaceful, even though ICE agents at the time were dragging a pregnant woman through the streets. So, yeah, ICE told the judge they arrested this guy, Noor, because he was screaming obscenities directly into an ICE officer's face and acting aggressively. But Noor, according to the judge, was merely trying to calm the crowd after ICE agents began dragging a pregnant woman through the streets. I have video. I have to warn you, it's not pleasant unless you're a Republican and you want to see a pregnant woman being dragged through the streets. This is from CBS News in Minnesota. You can see that is a pregnant woman being dragged by ICE agents, and Noor tried to explain to the ICE agents she's pregnant, and at the same time he was telling protesters to remain calm. This is from CBS News in Minnesota.
The first images were chaos, pushing, shoving, and screaming. We made our way to the center of the crowd and found a woman being held face down on the ground. People were screaming to let her go.
We kept yelling, she's pregnant, she's pregnant, she's pregnant. They put their knees in her, and we kept telling them, she can't breathe, let her up, let her up.
In the chaos, the woman who was handcuffed was suddenly being dragged by one arm as the angry crowd threw snowballs and screamed at the federal agents.
Your tax dollars hard at work. So the judge said she reviewed videos and testimony from witnesses showing ICE agents had absolutely no probable cause to arrest Noor, who was standing around recording the protests, recording ICE agents dragging a pregnant woman through the streets. ICE agents, according to witnesses, targeted Noor because of his complexion, with one ICE agent reportedly wrestling him to the ground, shouting, quote, "Somalis drained Minnesota." When Noor was being detained by ICE, some of the agents said half of the Somali residents were in this country fraudulently, and another told him all Somalis should go home. Abikdar Noor is a Somali immigrant who became a U.S. citizen 20 years ago. ICE agents, when they arrested him and detained him, told him to go back to Somalia. Now, where would ICE agents learn to talk this way to a Somali immigrant who has been a U.S. citizen for 20 years? Where does it come from? Donald Trump, on December 3rd, concluded his cabinet meeting by declaring Somalia a garbage country, saying he didn't want Somalians living here. He said their country, quote unquote, stinks. This is what Trump said, quote, our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point. I don't know if people mind me saying that, but I'm saying it. We could go one way or the other, and we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country, said the man who's married to how many immigrants did he marry? As he made those comments, as Donald Trump concluded his cabinet meeting on December 3rd, calling Somalia a garbage country, calling people who come from Somalia garbage, and he didn't want them living in our country. As he made these comments, our Vice President, J.D. Vance, nodded his head in agreement and then pumped his fist. Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of Defense, shouted, "Well said." J.D. Vance in 2024 spread the lie that Haitian immigrants in Ohio were stealing pets and turning them into food. When he was presented with overwhelming evidence that this wasn't true, he continued to tell the lie. when the governor of Illinois asked him to stop because people's lives were being threatened, he continued to tell the lie and then finally admitted, when the evidence was incontrovertible that he was lying, he said, yes, I'm lying. But he said, if I have to lie to express the pain that white Americans in Ohio are feeling, then it's worth it. Pete Hegseth's airstrikes in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, codenamed Operation Southern Spear, have killed at least 123 people of color. He calls them narco-terrorists, but he offers zero proof and kills the survivors, so there is none. Protests in Minneapolis continue outside the Whipple building. That's an ICE staging area in the city. Donald Trump warned that should the protests continue, he will invoke the Insurrection Act. By the end of last week, Trump said he saw no need to invoke the Insurrection Act quite yet, but he said it's on the table. He said, I don't think there's any reason right now to use it, but if I need it, I'd use it. It's very powerful. But he's a liar. Early Monday morning, the Washington Post is reporting the Pentagon has told 1,500 soldiers to prepare for active duty deployment to Minnesota as Trump is planning to invoke the Insurrection Act. Don't pay attention to what he says. I'm not attacking Venezuela. I'm not invoking the Insurrection Act. Wait and see what he does. The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, appearing on the Sunday talk shows, calling Trump's threat to order in troops unconstitutional and a violation of the protesters' First Amendment rights. He added, we will not counter Donald Trump's chaos with our own brand of chaos here. We're not going to give them an excuse to do the things that clearly they're trying to set up to do right now, which is these 1,500 troops. The Justice Department announced it has launched a criminal investigation into Mayor Frey, as well as the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, to determine if they have conspired to impede the work of ICE agents in Minneapolis. It is estimated nearly 3,000 federal agents right now are conducting raids throughout Minnesota, primarily Minneapolis, St. Paul. The governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, has put the state National Guard on standby if the situation merits it. President George Herbert Walker Bush was the last president to invoke the Insurrection Act when he responded to a request from the governor of California for help quelling Los Angeles rioting, sparked by a not guilty verdict in the trial of several white police officers accused of beating black motorist Rodney King. They beat him to within an inch of his life. So more than 30 years ago, there was video, incontrovertible evidence of police wailing on a black motorist. And a jury, a white jury in Simi Valley, California, where the Ronald Reagan Museum just happens to be, they saw that video and acquitted the white officers. And that sparked the rioting in Los Angeles in 1992. So when you watch the shooting of Renee Good by that ICE agent, and then you cannot believe how the right wing insists they don't see it as murder. Remember the Rodney King video. Remember how many Americans are blinded. Remember how many Americans are blinded by their own misogyny and racism. Jacob Lang, a 30-year-old right-wing rabble-rouser who served 4 years in prison for his involvement with January 6, he was pardoned by Donald Trump. Jacob Lang claims he was stabbed by counter-protesters in Minneapolis over the weekend while he was holding a pro-ICE anti-immigration rally. Lang was planning to burn a Koran while blasting Vanilla ICE's Ice Ice Baby. He never got a chance to set fire to the Koran as counter-protesters forced him to end his event. See what they're trying to do here? You burn a Koran to enrage the community. This is a J6er trying to help Donald Trump find an excuse to invoke the Insurrection Act. Videos on social media show Lang getting hit by snowballs and water balloons. It was below freezing weather, and he and several of his cohorts decided to call off their event and go back to their hotel rooms. Lang is running for the Republican nomination to fill the Florida Senate seat vacated by Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is now our Secretary of State, so he had to give up his seat. Donald Trump said anything less than U.S. control of Greenland is unacceptable. This is NATO troops arrived in Greenland for military operations as Donald Trump threatens to seize the Danish colony for America. But a new CNN poll shows an overwhelming majority of us, 75% of Americans, oppose taking Greenland. The poll shows 94% of Democrats oppose the United States taking Greenland. About half, 50% of Republicans are for it, the other half against it. Greenland is a member of NATO, and according to Article 5 of the NATO treaty, any attack on one country, one NATO member country, any attack on one NATO member country is an attack on all NATO member countries. NATO said an American attack on Greenland would be an attack on all NATO nations, including the United States. So invading Greenland is technically Trump attacking the United States. In other words, he's not willing to commit troops anywhere unless it hurts America. Nebraska House Republican and former Air Force Brigadier General Don Bacon calling Trump's threat to take Greenland, quote, utter buffoonery and grounds for impeachment. Donald Trump is now warning any country that opposes his efforts to annex Greenland could be subject to a 25% tariff. Trump said, I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland because we need Greenland for national security. Tariffs. The Supreme Court is expected this week, perhaps on the 20th, maybe Tuesday, to issue a ruling on whether Trump has the authority to act unilaterally when he imposes tariffs. The Supreme Court may on Tuesday hand down a ruling on whether or not all these tariffs are constitutional. Earlier in the week, Trump said he would impose a 25% tariff on any country that does business with Iran. So I know the law is hard, Byzantine, opaque, hard. It's hard to figure out. All this could be stopped by the Supreme Court. Nations devolve into fascist regimes because the lawyers, the courts, don't stand up for justice. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Pay attention to what he's doing, not what he says. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room. Please leave a comment. I read all your comments. Subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to my newsletter. Please share this. Did I ask you to hit the like button so I remain in your feed? I guess that covers everything. Okay, thank you.